Hi, I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
Norm, it's camera day.
I love cameras. I love taking pictures
I
of
like cameras.
dogs and bees and all sorts of
You
things.
took pictures of bees?
I took pictures of bees.
With a macro lens?
No, with just a regular zoom lens.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I've been championing mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras for a while now. I think they are this new product category where you have these compact cameras that have big sensors that are much better on your normal point and shoots, but not as cumbersome or daunting as a full DSLR.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's one of the first things, it's the first purely digital form factor for cameras. DSLRs take the old SLR form factor where you had roll for film and rollers and the things that moved the film along,
Yes.
you know, that lever,
Yes.
and all that stuff, and then jammed a digital sensor in there. Point and shoots did the same thing with point and shoot size cameras, and then phone cameras, I guess, are probably the first native digital format, but this I think is the first really interesting one.
Yeah, so I like the Sony NEX-C3. This is a camera I bought last year, and I've been shooting all my photos with this camera, but Sony is discontinuing the NEX-C3 and replacing it with the NEX-F3. So
It's 2 letters better.
Oh, I guess. It is still their 3 series of camera.
Okay.
And so in the Sony NEX family, there was the C3 and there was the 5N. And you bought the 5N.
I bought the 5N, that's this one right here.
Yeah,
it looks pretty much exactly the same with a little bit larger nub, and it has a little bit different electronics.
The body is a little
inside,
different.
basically.
You know, they both have exactly the same lens, same sensor. The 5N has a touchscreen in the back and it shoots 1080p video. The F3, which is replacing the C3, I have here. I'm gonna put this down right now.
You're putting your old camera on the ground, discarding it?
I'm not kicking it aside, I'm just putting it down, setting it down right now, has a few differences. So I'm gonna run through those differences right now. First of all, there's a built-in flash, and if you press this
I'm
button.
gonna take this hood off, just so people don't think that that's always on.
Okay.
It's optional.
You actually should not have the hood on, completely unnecessary. So the first thing that's a bit different about the NEX-F3 is that it has a built-in flash. Both the 5N and the C3 came with flash units that you could plug in.
It's a little dongle you jam
Yeah,
on
you
top.
jam it on
There's a
top,
hole.
you kind of screw it in, it's a little cumbersome. This one, you press a button and the flash just pops up.
How many times have you used your flash since you got your C3, Norm?
Not when actually testing it, 0.
Yeah.
I don't recommend using a flash unless you absolutely have to, especially since these cameras perform so well at nighttime.
The problem with flashes is that they wash out whatever you're shooting, and you end up with really hot, super bright spots, and then really dark spots all around. Sometimes you need a flash for like fill lighting, people standing up against a sunset or something like that.
Right.
But for the most part, flashes should be avoided.
Right, and especially built-in flashes, because you can't really control the angle of the flash. That's why there are accessories that can turn a built-in flash into a bounce flash. It's a little better. But I never really liked the flash. And these cameras are so good in low light. You can shoot at 1600 ISO, 3200 ISO, and the photos are not super grainy. They're very usable, especially for web, that you never really need a flash. The built-in flash makes this camera a lot bigger.
It's much bigger even than the 5N, which was already bigger than the C3. So it's a substantially larger camera. The first thing I noticed when picking it up is that it feels big.
It does feel big, and I think that's because Sony had a difficult time selling the N3 in brick and mortar stores, because a lot of people associate, just like the megapixel myth, associate bigger cameras with better sensor quality. I think this didn't need to be this big, this camera. If you look at the top, it actually is very similar to the 5N in that the shutter button placement is different now. So the grip is bigger.
I do actually really like the shutter button placement in the front instead of the top. It's much easier to kind of do a one-hand grip and shoot.
And the other big difference, so the couple other big differences, is now that the flip out LCD viewfinder goes all the way back up now.
So that's max up for me. I do find I shoot from the hip a lot. I know you do as well, kind of load it, shooting down toward like this.
Yes, if you hold the camera down at waist height, you can fold the LCD up and shoot from the hip. I love doing that.
It's great, especially when you're taking pictures of dogs and cats. You can get way down on the ground
without
at
having
the dog's
to
angle,
squat down.
Without having to lay on the ground.
And now, if you're able to flip up the lens or the viewfinder all the way up, you can actually take a picture of yourself. And if you take a picture, it'll actually do a little countdown timer.
That's
fetching.
awkward.
But at the expense of being able to tilt the viewfinder down.
So I find myself doing this even more often, right? Where I shoot from the top down, hold it up above people's heads. I'm in a crowd, something like that. I'm a relatively tall guy, so it doesn't happen that often. But I'm sure for people closer to your height, holding up and shooting down happens fairly frequently.
Very frequently, especially at concerts. I love being able to tilt the LCD downward. With the F3, you can't tilt it down as much. So another big difference, this now does 1080p video.
Well, that's nice. I find that the 1080p on this camera is pretty good, although it does have the kind of side judder problems that a lot of
It records at 17 megabits per second or 24 megabits per second. It'll also do 24 FPS, which I like. But that's in the APS-C HD format, which is a Sony Panasonic proprietary format.
And you have to import that into, say, Final Cut or whatever to do anything with it.
Exactly. And then there is still an accessory port on top, and you don't need to use it now for the microphone, or the flash, obviously, but you can put in a microphone, which is a separate accessory you can buy.
So it's like a shitty boom mic?
Yeah, the directional mic.
Okay.
Or you can put in the EVF, the electronic viewfinder that Sony also sells, that fits into the 5N.
Have you tried
or
that?
the F3. I have. It's $350.
Wow!
So I would actually not recommend that. It's more than half the price
of
this camera.
One of my concerns when going from a DSLR with a viewfinder to a camera that has just a screen for the back was that I wouldn't be able to see it well enough in the outside, especially if I was wearing sunglasses or something like that. I find that the camera does, at least the 5N does a good job of adjusting and increasing brightness until you're able to see it pretty well, even in like broad daylight in the middle of summer. That's still the case?
That's absolutely the case here. And the final change here, which is not something that's aesthetically noticeable, is the processor speed. So there's a new Sony processor in here, and doing a direct comparison with my C3 and this F3, the F3 just takes pictures faster. I'm not talking about the frame rate and how many FPS, I'm talking about just the immediate response time by pressing the shutter button and how long it takes for it to process the image and let you review the photo. You never notice it unless you're a big user of the old camera, and which I am, and just walking down the street and taking photos and then reviewing them immediately. Having the same speed memory card in both cameras, the response time, I am able to take more pictures more efficiently with this camera because the photos just show up faster. Still take SD memory cards or memory stick. They actually use the same battery between the C3, the F3, and the 5N. So if you buy the extra batteries and you upgrade, you can still use the same. It takes about 450 shots. That was, for me yesterday, a full day of shooting, including some video, with 10-15% battery left. It does not include a separate battery charger, only charges over USB. So they did skip on the cost. I did like that the C3 gave me
external batteries.
External battery charger, because if I buy extra batteries, I can have one always charging and just swap them out at the end of the day.
It's worth mentioning, I got about 7 days worth, 500 and some shots on the 5N. So that was a whole week's worth of shooting for me.
And of course there is HDMI out if you want to plug this directly into the TV. These cameras are being positioned as kind of like a step up from people traditionally using point and shoots. So there's a lot of like intelligent auto features. If you don't want to shoot in aperture priority, if you don't want to shoot in shutter priority, if you just want to twist the lens to zoom in, you can get a lot of the effects that you can.
They call it intelligent screen auto or something like that, right?
So you can do smart photo cropping, it'll recognize faces, it'll do smile detection, and it'll automatically even crop into the photo.
It'll even wait to trigger the shutter until it picks up the person smiling.
Exactly. So if you want to do fancy effects, nice bokeh, if you want to have black and white photos or bring out certain colors, this camera will do all of that. It's actually a lot of fun for people who don't have experience with DSLRs.
I mean, for what it's worth, I usually set an aperture priority or shutter priority depending on when I'm shooting. When I'm using it, when I hand it over to my wife, she knows to just switch it to the automatic quick setting, and she takes really nice pictures with it. So
now,
it's
unlike
a good hybrid approach.
Yes. Unlike the C3, they're not selling this camera with the prime lens anymore. It only comes with the zoom lens. It's an 18mm to 55mm f3.5 to 5.6 zoom lens, which I think is actually the better lens of the two.
It's very versatile. Gary bought his camera with the pancake lens and upgraded to this one within a couple months.
Super happy. They're no longer making the C3 anymore, and I think the prices might go down on those on eBay. I would actually recommend, if you want to spend around $500 on a camera, look for either a used C3 or one that's on eBay.
New in box, but out of print,
out of production. Because the F3 at $600, I think I don't like the body it being that much bigger, and that built-in flash really is not useful to me. So that's the Sony NEX-F3. I quite like it. I didn't like it as much as I loved the C3 when I first got it.
For Tested, I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
See you guys later.
Bye.